There, these are the background notes for Unit 8, Sexuality and Morality. So as we begin this unit, it's important to distinguish between two different kind of terms or concepts, sex and sexuality. When we're talking about sexuality, we're talking about more than just sexual intercourse, more than just what happens with our bodies. Humans are social creatures, and sexuality is part of who we are as humans. We're going to define sexuality as how we express ourselves as physical, spiritual creatures. So it's kind of your sense of who you are as a girl and how you express kind of being a girl to the rest of the world, or a young woman to the rest of the world. And sexual intercourse, it's more than just a bodily function, because it involves not only our physical self, but it involves our spiritual self as well. So throughout history, there have been a couple of different ways to look at sexuality. And the first one we're going to talk about is a dualistic view. So dualism divides the human being into higher and lower components, and the lower component is evil. So it's like good, evil, black, white, so thinking, feeling, and this was pretty popular in early Christianity in the Middle Ages, and this view said thinking is good, things that happen with your brain are good, things that your body does are not good, because those are just like any old other things that animals can do. And so that view looked very negatively upon sexuality, sex, women. If you have to pick, men, women, well, men are good, women are not. Now, obviously, that is not church teaching about sex and sexuality and men and women. Rather, Christian morality looks at sex and sexuality with a sacramental view, taking a really holistic perspective on the human person. So if you think of the word holistic, it sounds like whole, and holistic really means total. This view recognizes that everything that we are as human beings is holy. Our bodies, our spirit, our thoughts, everything has been created by God, and everything is holy. And the physical part of ourselves helps us interact with the sacred. So one of the ways that we encounter God is through nature, is through God's creation, through things that are physical. And so sexuality is really an expression of our spirituality. God's goodness can be found in our sexuality. So the way that we use our sexuality and sex to relate to other people, we can see God's goodness in that. So we've talked about different commandments in different units. So our last unit, for example, focused in particular on the 5th commandment. In this unit, the 6th commandment, which talks about not committing adultery, and the 9th commandment about not coveting your neighbor's wife. Both of those commandments really encourage us to practice virtues that help us respect both our sexuality and that of other people. So what does Scripture have to say about all this? We learn from the very beginning of the Bible, first book of Genesis, that humans are created in God's image and likeness, and God declares them to be good and declares us to be good. We also learn from Scripture that idolatry can be a danger. So idolatry is when we take anything, we are all consumed with any one thing, and we treat that thing as if it were more important than God. We learn that sexuality is part of God's good creation, but like everything else about being human, sexuality can be corrupted, and we can become sinful or do things that are sinful, particularly if we are tempted by idolatry, and if we forget that we have been created in God's image and likeness and that we are good. So a couple definitions here for us. Chastity is a definition that came up for us in our last unit, but it's appropriate to talk about that again. Chastity is expressing one's sexuality appropriately for one's life situation. So sometimes, as we said last unit, we're tempted to think about chastity as just not having sex or not trying to express one's sexuality in any way. And that's not true. For people who are single or in religious life, yes, they're going to express their sense of sexuality or personhood differently than someone who is married. Self-restraint involves the right channeling of our drives and impulses. So self-restraint really just means kind of holding back and recognizing when things are good for us and when things are not good for us. So kind of taking those drives or those impulses or those kind of feelings that we might have to act in a particular way and hold back at certain times. So for example, if I have an impulse or a drive to eat lots of junk food, I might need to show some self-restraint because that might not be healthy for me to eat junk food at every meal or every time that I want some. And modesty is the virtue of temperance. So remember, temperance is kind of that right judgment. And modesty is when we apply that to how we speak, how we dress, and how we conduct ourselves. Modesty does not mean never interacting with anyone, never wanting to wear clothing that looks good. Doesn't mean those things, but what it does mean is that we speak in a way that reflects how much we value ourselves and how much we know that we are created by God and are good. Modesty means we dress in a way that shows that we respect ourselves and we believe that we are God's good creation, and we conduct ourselves in a way that shows that we respect ourselves and shows that we know we are created by God and are good. So one of the things that we're going to talk about in this unit is sexual activity and sexual behavior. So it's a little more focused than just sexuality. And society can look at sex in a couple of different, we can find people that have different beliefs about when sex is appropriate and when it's not. People who have a kind of recreational view of sexual activity say, sure, sexual activity is okay, as long as both people have given their consent, so mutual consent. So as long as both people say it's okay, go ahead. A lot of times these people fail to consider the consequences of sexual activity, both physical and emotional consequences. Then there are other people who say, no, it's not, sexual activity is not okay. You need more than just both people saying it's okay. Sexual activity is okay when two people are in love, and that's where the line is, and that view does include the idea that there is an emotional component to sex, but what happens when circumstances change? What happens when those people don't feel love for each other anymore? And then there's another kind of group that says, no, you know what, you need more than just mutual consent. You need more than being in love. Sexual activity is okay when those two people have expressed some sort of degree of commitment to each other. So they're engaged, they're living together, they're exclusively boyfriend and girlfriend. And so that view kind of puts the line even further, but almost committed is not the same as fully committed. So just saying, yes, we're in an exclusive relationship. There's a difference between a couple that's engaged and a couple that has made vows to each other in front of their friends and family and colleagues. And it's hard for me to describe that to you, because you don't have the same kind of level of life experience. But there's a difference between being almost committed and being fully committed, and we can talk about that more in class. So in the Christian tradition and in Catholic morality, church teaching views sexual activity in marriage as serving 4 different goals. And you can either star or underline or highlight. The first 2 of these are probably the most important. The first is unitive. So sex in marriage brings that couple closer together. Sex in marriage also helps a couple to bear and raise children. So you need sex in a marriage to bring that couple closer together, and you need sex in a marriage so that that couple can become a family. The third and fourth goals is that sex in marriage can teach those people in that couple how to relate to other people in their community. So, you learn within this couple how to not be selfish, how to care for another person. And you can take that lesson into your wider community. And that can also show you a little bit of what God's love is like. And so church teaching, and so you could say, well, what if couple is engaged, or couple's living together, or couple's decided to be exclusive? Sex can bring that couple closer together. Sex can help that couple raise kids, and they can experience the love of God and be good community members too. So why does sex only belong in marriage? And church teaching will say this. Say children deserve to be born into a stable family with people who have the maturity to be good parents. They'll say that sex before marriage can lead to premature bonding. They can, kind of merge identities before you've had a chance to form your own. And if you take a look at this little comic, it's from the comic strip Zits. These 2 characters are Rich and Amy, and they're always portrayed as pretty much being stuck together. And sex before marriage can really lead to you being part of a Rich and Amy instead of figuring out who you are as a unique individual person. Another rationale for keeping sexual activity in marriage is that sometimes the experience of sexual intercourse can make a relationship seem like it's going to last forever. And if you are a young person, that can cloud your judgment, can set you up for hurt. And you can get the sense that, oh, I'm being so intimate with this person, or this person really gets me. And that's an artificial intimacy. It's not... you're not necessarily being known and appreciated for who you are. And the last rationale, that couple can learn and grow together in their married relationship. And so another big topic that we're going to talk about in this particular unit are the idea about reproductive technologies. So basically science helping people have babies. And many of these procedures can be procreative. So these procedures, if you're thinking about IVF or a surrogate mother, that produces life. But church teaching will kind of look at these and say, well, do these procedures enhance both the unitive and procreative aspects of marriage? So yeah, that procedure helped a couple have a baby. Did that procedure bring that couple closer together? Another big question is what happens to embryos that are not used, but are, created in a laboratory setting. So church teaching has some guidelines for these different reproductive technologies. The first guideline is that procedures which assist marital intercourse in reaching its procreative potential are moral. So, for example, if If something was blocked and you undergo a procedure to unblock that, so that a baby could be conceived naturally, that would be moral. A procedure that adds a third party into the act of conception, so like a surrogate mother, or substitute some sort of laboratory procedure for intercourse. So instead of, egg being fertilized in mom's body, it's being fertilized in a laboratory setting. According to church teaching, that's not acceptable. But we do need to kind of add a big but there. I'm sure many of you know friends or family members that have dealt with problems having children, or struggling for people who would be awesome parents. And we see families that have kids, and we think, okay, well, you know what, they are awesome parents, and that kid is awesome, and this is fantastic. What's wrong with this? We need to remember that any child, no matter how they were created, is a child of God, created in God's image and likeness, and is good. And so it's separate from kind of a moral discussion about these different reproductive technologies. So we just want to make that point. In class, we're going to look at some different examples of reproductive technologies. It's part of the reason why Catholic teaching draws the line where it does is some of these questions can be really problematic. So, what happens to those embryos that aren't used? What happens when a procedure goes wrong, or there's a mix-up, or then what do you do? What do you do in those cases? So, I think church teaching kind of looks at this as opening a can of worms. So, yes, this one example might seem okay, but what about this example, or this example, or this example? And church teaching is going to argue that, sex in marriage needs to kind of fulfill all four of those goals. Doesn't mean that every time a married couple has sex, they're going to get a baby that results from that, but that couple needs to be open to that possibility. So we're going to start looking at different examples of these cases in class, and kind of talk about how they relate to the church's moral teaching. See you then.